There we go. So, Patrick Heller, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here and for
Yeah.
sharing, a conversation about Agile and the Scrum, etc. Right. So, Patrick, could you walk us through who is Patrick and how did you start? Where do you live? What did you study? And how did you got to this Agile stuff?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor. Yeah, it's nice being here. So I started as a developer in the 1990s. I started Oracle stuff, some database stuff, and gradually I did a lot of things, became a full stack developer. And then at a certain point, it was like 2007, 2008. I worked at a company and we had these big bang releases every half year, and it was always very stressful, and nobody really liked it. The developers didn't like it, the directors didn't like it, nobody liked it. So we said, okay, there must be another way of doing this. And we went on a search and figured, okay, maybe this agile thing is some Scrum, reading about things like Kanban, etc. I said, okay, I'm going to dive into that, and we'll just do it that way. We'll just start. So I became the Scrum Master, and we just went off, and yeah, it was a small company, so we had just three teams. But within a couple of months, we had everything working like clockwork. We had a new release every 2 weeks for all the 36,000 users, and it was perfect. It was smooth, and yeah, that was really nice, and that really got me going. I thought, okay, I want to do more of this and less development work. So I went back into consulting again, but this time as a Scrum Master slash Agile coach. And yeah, I went from company to company, mostly large corporate organizations, sometimes some smaller organizations, and yeah, always trying to find that same vibe. Yeah, as we did there. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing. What do you like more, the Scrum Mastering part or the Agile coaching? I have Agile coaches that actually really like to go deep in the trenches with the team. So, what's your take?
Yeah, I've done a lot of combined jobs. So that I was hired as a Scrum Master and an Agile coach. Yeah, I really like that because you see the both sides of the story, right? As an Agile coach, you work with the whole organization and also with management, etc. And as a Scrum Master, you're indeed in the trenches. You feel the vibe within the team, and you see the other side of the picture. And yeah, I think that works really well if you see both sides. And I like both things. Sometimes it's very nice to be in a team and feel that team environment, and really work with the hands-on stuff, and really work with people one on one, etc. It's really nice. And sometimes you think, okay, yeah, if I want to make bigger steps within this organization, then it's better to work with the management team and to accomplish, yeah, like I said, bigger steps. And that always gives a nice feeling, but in a very different way.
Yeah. Okay. So then at some point, Patrick, you start with some ideas or with some notes, or at what point do you start thinking about writing a book? Right. I understand that you have two books.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Nice.
if you can see them, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always liked writing. I've been writing since I was young, and usually was fiction. But then at a certain point, when I started to learn more about agile, I was making these notes for myself, and I thought at a certain point, okay, maybe I can put these notes into a booklet. And that was the first one that I put out, this agile essentials for modern leadership. And that's basically a small collection of shorter articles that I wrote. And then this other book about psychology. This one I wrote when I was studying more and more psychology. I figured that a lot of the coaching that I did had a lot to do with psychology, because you're working with people, many times one on one. And if you look at teams, how people interact with each other, a lot of that has to do with psychology. So I started to study psychology more and more, doing courses left and right at different universities online. And I wrote down all these notes, and I thought I can do the same thing over here. I can collect these notes and create one book out of it. And maybe other people will benefit from that as well. So yeah, that grew. And yeah, now it's like 300 pages. So yeah, I now heard a lot of good things from people reading it, because it is indeed a very concise collection of all kinds of elements of psychology, but then also applied to your everyday situation in an organization. That's usually that's sort of the bridge that I try to create, because if you read psychology books or you do courses about psychology, it's usually about the psychology itself and not in an environment, right? And I tried to make the connection between the psychology on the one hand and the corporate environment on the other hand. And how do you connect those two? How do you apply the knowledge of the psychology in your everyday work environment? That's the connection I try to make, first for myself, and then through making the notes, hopefully also for other people.
That sounds really, really interesting, because I actually also believe that this studying psychology will help you. The role of the agile coach and the scrum master, they have to do a lot with talking to people, right? Hearing them a lot and
Yeah.
trying to provide some guidance and some coaching. So it's very well connected to this side of the psychology. So I think it should be really helpful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Um, okay, Patrick, talking about agile, we will leave in the comments or in the description of the video the link to those two books, so they can whoever wants to look for them, they will be able to buy them right away, right? So look for them over there,
Yeah.
please. And yeah, so talking about agile, how would you explain to a small 10-year-old kid what agile is?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I'm always thinking about, okay, how can I put this in a very short description? Indeed, not just for 10-year-olds, but also for people inside organizations. Because people often, what is agile to you? People always have very different explanations. And to me, agile is all about trying to learn as fast as you can on what to do next. So the critical thing here is the feedback loop. So you do something, you get your feedback on how you did that, you learn from that, and you take the next step. And that's how you try to improve whatever you're doing. Every step you take, you learn from it. So the learning aspect is most important, I think.
Yeah, pretty well resumed. So the Agile Manifesto was created over 2 decades ago, right? In your opinion, Patrick, do we need a refreshed version, or are the principles still valid? What's your take on
I think the bigger part is still valid. I do think that the people that wrote it, they were all software developers, right? So the context in which they wrote it is purely based on writing software. And nowadays, what you see is that inside organizations, people try to create business agility. So that's not just software. You try to create an entire movement within your organization that is agile. You try to combine business with your software. You try to do marketing in an agile way. And I've even seen construction companies work in an agile way. So the whole concept of working in an agile way is much broader than the way they saw it at that moment. I think, yeah, that was their context. But yeah, I think if you look at it from that perspective, I think most of it is still applicable, but you just have to keep that context in mind.
Yeah, maybe if they got together again, or maybe at that time they didn't imagine that this would be so big, right? They were just scoping
Exactly.
it to software development, but yeah, who would
Yeah.
have imagined, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So regarding your view of leadership, Patrick, how have you seen? You have a long career, right? And I'm sure that you have seen how leadership is evolving, right? What's your take on this, on leadership?
I've seen it evolving, but different with different people. So what you see is that some people really get it, and they know that, okay, servant leadership is a thing. So I must go from giving directions to asking questions. Giving the right directions is what I used to do, and now I have to ask the right questions so that people can make up their own mind. They can co-steer in the right direction. So there are people that get that, but there are also still a lot of people that still figure I know best, and I'll let people do their thing as long as it doesn't go outside the rails, the guardrails. And but if something goes wrong, I'll dive in and and put it straight. And I don't know, you would want the leadership in the world to converge more towards the servant leadership model, but it's not happening in every place. And I think it's also part of what kind of people move up the ladder. And yeah, unfortunately, still in many organizations, as well as in politics and basically everywhere, it's still people that are very much competitive and want to be a strong leader, and they want to direct and they want to command and control. Those are the people that still go up the ladder pretty easy, and that still creates this the way of thinking that we don't like to see. But yeah, so it's a bit dual, I think.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Um, Another topic, interesting one in my opinion, metrics. Have you seen metrics evolve? Do you like to use metrics in this agile world, or do you got rid of them, or do you use agile metrics, or what do you think?
I do like metrics actually, but it depends on which metrics. So sometimes, if you use Jira or Jira Align or something like that, you get all kinds of metrics and all kinds of graphs and things. And it's easy to either misinterpret them or misuse them. If managers start looking at velocities and comparing teams against each other with the velocity and things, that's bad. But if you look at different things that you can measure, then I think, yeah, it's very useful if you use it, for instance, on a team level. If you say, okay, a team wants to measure certain things to improve itself, to look at certain numbers in a retrospective and say, yeah, how did we do on this or that? How was our whip limit this sprint? Or how are we dealing with our work happiness? Something like that. Those are things that the team itself can use for itself, and then I think is very useful. And one of the things that I've learned about sports psychology, for instance, is that you can have different looks at metrics. Like you have like performance metrics and outcome metrics, like how many medals did you get this year? But you can also look at did I improve my personal records? That has nothing to do with your outside circumstances. That's about you yourself. But you can also look at things like how am I doing on sleep this past week, or how am I doing on nutrition? I mean, that's something even more personal, and it's nothing to do with setting records or something. So in a team, you can also look at things that way, right? So work happiness, that's something like that's for the team itself. It's not necessarily related to revenue or whatever costs or whatever, but it's something internal, and it is important for the team itself. And you can all go all the way to how much did we cost these past 6 sprints, and how much what was our net promoter score or whatever, something external that somebody else influences. So yeah, I do think metrics are useful if you use them in the right way.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay. Patrick, do you think that agile is suitable for all projects, or do you think that just for certain kind of challenge?
Yeah, usually when I try to explain what agile is to newbies, people who are new to agile, I always take the Stacy matrix. So you see that if things are very simple, there's very much known work, and you know how to do it, etc., then maybe agile is not the best thing. And when things are complex, then agile is perfect, right? And when things become too chaotic, then yeah, maybe some forms of agile like Kanban can be used. But yeah, there's this optimal zone in the Stacy matrix. And I think, yeah, in most cases, you can use some form of agile. And I think in very few cases, it's no use. And you just simply have to plan and do. If you have to install certain stuff in. Oh, let's cut that out. No, let's skip that. So in most cases, some form of agile is useful, and I think in very limited cases, you just simply plan and do.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Regarding documentation, has Agile devalued the importance of thorough documentation?
Yeah, that's always a tricky part, right? In the Agile Manifesto, it's one side is valued more than the other. So working software valued more than documentation. And of course, that's true. You would rather see something tangible working than see some document about it. But it also says that it values the one side more than the other. It doesn't mean that the other side is not valued at all. So I always think about, okay, if you just hand over some piece of software or even hardware with no description whatsoever, then it better be something that everybody is already used to for a long time, like a phone. If you buy a new phone nowadays, there's no booklet anymore with it, right? It's just a phone and everybody knows how it works, and that's okay. But if it's something new and not everybody knows everything about it, then you better have some description there. And especially also in the software industry, it's quite easy to also automatically create some documentation, right? You can automate that, so you can also make it easy for yourself to create a limited set of documentation. So I think it's in most cases it's valuable to have some documentation. The automation makes it easy for you, so why not? But always make it yeah, as limited as possible, because yeah, you want to go fast.
Got it. Thank you. Patrick, there are many Scrum Masters hopefully looking at this video, and they might be thinking, well, I'm doing a decent version of Scrum. I'm okay. My team is working good. What would be some, hidden anti patterns or hidden anti agile practices that you have seen that are hard to see, right? I'm looking not for the daily is just the daily stand up or the daily scrum is just
Mhm.
a report for some managers, right? That's the classic one. What examples can you seen or have you detected in your experience that are not just as visible as that one, right? Like hidden anti pattern.
Well, basically two things I think I can think of. One of them is being too strict with the rules. Say, the Scrum guide says this, or over here in Safe it says this and that. We need to do it that way, and not being flexible enough to think about, okay, but what do we need right now in this situation, in this organization, at this moment in time? It might be something that is going against your agile feeling, against your agile nerves, but it is what the organization needs right now. And it takes some experience and some guts from a scrum master or an agile coach to step over your own nervousness about going against what is the most agile thing, considering yeah, what you know about agile. So that's one thing I think that takes some experience and some guts.
Yeah.
Yeah, you recognize that. And another thing, what I was thinking of is, I was thinking of something else. Yeah. And another thing you might think of is like the psychology within the teams. So you can see some Scrum Masters coaching their team or maybe the surroundings of a team as if the team is one entity. But what you see is that a team is usually consistent of individuals, and you have to treat individuals differently. People interact with each other, and that forms hopefully a team. In the beginning it might be a group of individuals, but people are in different phases in their lives. They have different experiences, have different thoughts, different meanings, different all kinds of different things that you have to take into account. And it takes some experience, life experience, and maybe some knowledge about psychology to deal with that in a proper way. And if you, especially beginning Scrum Masters, are always thinking about the rituals and things, am I doing things right? But that's not always the most important thing. It's about, okay, how do these people think? How do they respond to each other? How do they interact? And there's much more to that than you see at the surface.
Got it. Thanks for sharing. So one of the challenges that I have recently been facing with some transformation with teams coming from Waterfall is that these guys and girls have been doing really well for the last decade with their product, right? So they are top of the industry. So when I jump in and I try to implement Scrum, they are like, I don't care about your Scrum or your agile ways of working or whatever. I don't believe in that, so I don't care, right? How do you deal with these kind of persons that do not believe in this, and they are really good, and they have been doing really good, right? How would you tackle this?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot, and also the company that I'm coaching right now, they're very good, top of their industry, just like you said. Well, the first thing I've taught myself is the first thing to do is to listen. You don't want to barge into a place and say, "Oh, you're going to do it this way, that way, and I know how to do it. I've done this a million times before, and you just listen to me, and now we'll figure it out." No, just first listen to them. Understand what their problems are and try to find hooks. They will have their issues somewhere. You will see that even though they say that everything is going perfectly fine, if you listen well enough, then you will find hooks and you say, okay, this is not going the way you want it, or maybe I have questions about that. How are you doing that? And sometimes maybe you see that they're not sharing knowledge, or so there are one or two people that are very experienced and they know everything. But if they are on leave, on holiday or something, then the whole team grinds to a halt because they have the knowledge and they are not in. Something like that. There's always something that they do not see immediately or do not see as a problem that you can think of, okay, but that might be a thing that we would do differently from an agile perspective, so that you can hook into that. And sometimes things are changing already, so that's also a thing that you see from change management. If things are changing in a certain direction, you can try to hook onto that and see, okay, if we are going in that direction, I might know a trick or two to do that in a good way, and then thus you can help and prove yourself, and that will get you some respect, and then gradually you work yourself into a really respectable position, and they can trust you.
Okay, Patrick, could you share with the audience two stories? One story of maybe a success in your career that you feel proud of. We did this transformation or something like that. And then another story about a failure, something that didn't go as expected. And what did you learn from this?
So the success, I think, what I told you about the first company that I started as a Scrum Master, I think we had everything perfectly aligned. Also with like I said, it was a small company. We had three teams, and one of the directors, he was also the product owner, and we had a backlog that was completely visible to all the customers. So there were like hundreds of customers, and some are big, some are small. But they could all see the entire backlog, and they could also put in requests for new things in the backlog, and then everybody could vote for those items. So if somebody saw, like, somebody put in something, a request for a new dash, just thinking of something, and somebody else from another company said, "Hey, yeah, that's a good idea. I want that as well." So they could give it a thumbs up. And then if that item got more likes, it went up in priority. And if some company said, "But yeah, I have a request, but nobody likes it, nobody else wants it, but we really, really want it," then they could also pay more money. And then it would
Mm,
also go up in the priority list. And
nice.
there was never a discussion for the product owner. The discussions were easy because, yeah, your item is not coming up because nobody likes it. So you can pay for it, or otherwise it will stay there at the bottom, or we will remove it from the list. So that was very transparent and very, they could even make money out of it. I thought that, oh yeah, that was really, really cool because it was really, yeah, transparent and open, and very, very clear. I thought that was really nice the way we handled that. Yeah.
Sounds cool.
And if you think about something that went wrong, yeah, I think when I was talking about metrics, now I like metrics. I was coaching at this organization, and there were many more agile coaches and scrum masters, and I was very enthusiastic about using certain metrics, and I was sort of being an evangelist for these metrics, and all those other coaches and scrum masters, they were looking at me like, we don't like that very much. And they said, yeah, you're a little bit too enthusiastic about it, and they didn't like that very much. So I felt like, okay, yeah, maybe I was pushing it maybe a little bit too hard, and maybe I should come back from that. Yeah, that was not so nice. Yeah,
That's cool. That's not
yeah.
That's not so bad, right? But it's a easy lesson learned, right? That's cool. Okay.
Yeah, that's also about taking not just the people that you coach along, but also your fellow coaches and
Hmm.
scrum master that you have in the organization. You have to do it together, right? So if you go in a sort of a different direction than the other people, that's not helpful.
Yeah, got it. Good lesson over there. Okay, so Patrick, regarding certifications, I stalked you a little in your LinkedIn, and there's a lot of certifications that you have. So if you could go back in time and do it again, what certifications would you suggest or would you recommend, and which ones would you say, meh, it was not so good for the price or whatever, right? So what's your advice on these?
Yeah, I have a very I have mixed feelings about certifications because when I was starting out, I didn't believe so much in certifications. Also, if you look at the timeline, there's a gap there of a few years that I didn't get any certifications. So I was always like, yeah, I'll learn from experience, and it just costs money. Why would I bother? But then there came a moment when I saw that when they hire people, yeah, the people that hire others, that's the first thing they look at. They look at do they have certain certifications? Check, check, check. And if you don't have those, then it's like, yeah, you're gone. So I thought, okay,
Hmm.
yeah, maybe it's useful in that respect to get certain certifications. So okay, let's do it. So I went mainly to scrum.org and get those certifications, PSM1 and etc. And then I really started to see also the benefit of getting those certifications, not just from the point of having a certificate and getting that on your LinkedIn, but also checking yourself. Okay, do I understand what they're asking? Do I still understand the whole concepts and the way they ask the questions? And can I challenge myself in that way? And you can do a lot of open assessments on Scrum.org, for instance. And still regularly do those, even though you don't get a certificate for that. You just do some open assessment, check, check, check. Do I still get all the marks right? And yeah, it sometimes helps you think a little bit different about certain wordings. They're very precise about it. And yeah, looking back, it did help me. So I really like the Scrum.org ones. So PSM1, PSM2. Yeah, I was actually thinking about getting PSPO2 because I'm now coaching quite a few product owners and chief product owners at the company I'm coaching right now. So I thought, okay, I'll get the PSPO2. Yeah, so it's keeping you sharp, I think, to say the least. And it's also helpful if you run into companies that are just going through a checklist first before they actually talk to you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. You mentioned that you're coaching PMs, PMO, POs. What would be the biggest challenge that you see that product managers are facing in companies today?
Yeah, what I see is the challenge usually between the old-fashioned project world and the agile world on the other side. So what you usually see nowadays is that a lot of companies still finance projects, and so you don't have budgets for teams to just work in an agile way, but they need to first get a project and get a budget from a project and then do the work. And yeah, especially for product owners or product managers, they they are on that edge between the projects and the agile teams. So yeah, that's one big challenge they have. On the other hand, yeah, getting the connection between the business demands that are then defined as a project. So they want the whole thing and exactly as described within a certain time frame. And that yeah, then you need to be a strong product owner or product manager to stand up to that and say, but hey, let's look at what's most valuable and let's do that first, and then check it out and go from there. Yeah, you need to be strong-willed to oppose that project way of thinking. I think that's a big challenge.
Got you. Okay. Maybe you could share with the audience, how do you keep learning, right? Do you like to read some authors, some books? Do you like to look in the community for scrum.org, which like a lot and I learn a lot? So do you like to look at some podcasts? So how, if someone looks at this video, what would be the advice to keep learning, right?
Yeah, I do. I do keep a close eye on LinkedIn. I do look at influencers like the Liberators and Jam Jelly and people like that. But I also read a lot. So yeah, you see my my books over here. I haven't read them all, but yeah, I regularly buy books and that I think okay, those are interesting in a conceptual way, either from a psychology perspective or from an agile perspective, and see what I can learn from that. I rarely use books as a tool to read from cover to cover, but I usually read bits and pieces, and I also look at videos, and I read a lot on LinkedIn, a lot of articles, stuff like that. Yeah, and I try to cherry pick. Okay, this is useful. I can use that. Okay, let's see what this person is talking about. Dive into it. Where does it usually I try to find, okay, what is the origin of what they're talking about? So sometimes people mention something and okay, who is the writer of that book? And then I buy that book and then learn directly from the person that thought of it. And that's, yeah, that's usually what I do. Try to go to the source of what was being said.
Got okay. Regarding your agile, knowledge, is there any concepts that have changed over the years? Like, for example, in my case, I just figured out that story points are not the best thing in the world. Like I used to think 2 or 3 days, not days, years ago, right? So, like this one, do you have any concepts that have changed or have evolved as you learn more about agile and like frameworks, etc.?
Yes, I think what I see with many experienced coaches and scrum masters is that in the earlier days, people were a lot more strict about how you should do things, and people were following the same guidelines, like you said, with story points or how many people are in a team, or yeah, all kinds of things about the rules of the product owner or scrum master. And nowadays, you see more experienced people like, okay, I know a lot of these things are not going to work directly, immediately in this company. So, okay, let's just take what we can. And like I said, maybe you sometimes have to do things or arrange things that might not be super agile, but that's the best we can do right now, and we can take it from there. And I think, yeah, sometimes you see people have an aversion against even the word agile. So then more experienced people will say, okay, then we'll just leave the word agile out of it, but we'll just focus on what we're going to do. We're going to learn from what we do, get the feedback, and take the next step. You don't have to use the word agile in that respect anymore. So people will go and look for little hooks that you can use instead of being totally strict. And this is what it says, this is what it is, and this is how we're going to do it. Because that's, yeah, in practice, I think that has changed a bit.
Yeah, same for me. I'm being a lot more flexible with any framework or any rules that I see that I learn, right?
Yeah,
So I totally agree.
yeah.
What do you think about safe? Do you think that safe is agile or it's not agile? What's your take on?
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of Safe. I do see, nowadays, if you look at the website, it's huge, right? There's a lot of information. There's a lot of good things there. If you use it as a library for all kinds of interesting things that you could apply, then I think it's very useful. I use it as well. I look at it regularly. Company I'm coaching right now, it also uses a form of safe. The interesting thing is that, I believe it was 2017, Dean Leffingwell, the one that created Safe, he was in the Netherlands where I live, and he was talking in front of a room full of Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, and he said. Yeah, I'm saying this to you guys now. The whole picture of Safe, it's very big, but the most important thing is the stuff at the bottom, and that's where the teams are. And that's the most important thing. All the other stuff, he said, I created so to make it easy to make it land in large organizations, because people in organizations at higher levels, management levels, they see themselves in the picture and say, oh yeah, that's, I'm still there, my job is still safe,
Hmm.
it will be a different name, but I will still be there. So it's easy to make it land in a larger organization. But he said the main thing of the whole safe picture is still at the bottom. It's the teams doing Scrum, basically, yeah, working iterative. So I thought, okay, yeah, because he knew he was in a room full of people skeptical about safe, right? So many agile minded people are skeptical of safe. So that was kind of taking the wind out of the sails of the skeptics. But I always kept it in mind. Okay, yeah, he does understand what it's about. And if you look at the website, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. But if you see organizations following it very narrowly and very precisely, trying to fill in everything that's in that big picture of safe, then I think, yeah, that's missing the point. That's not what agility is about. So yeah, mixed feeling.
Yeah, I'm with you in this one. I also have mixed feelings about safe. Okay. So, last week I had a question from a customer asking if we could prepare 4 teams to start doing Scrum, right? So he mentioned this Sprint Zero, concept, which I don't like to call it like that, but I do think that that is good to spend some days trying to prepare a team that has never done Scrum or that doesn't know about Agile for or to start sprint one, right? Do you think this is necessary or do you like to start right away? If it's necessary, then what would you teach them? Would you give them an Agile workshop or a Scrum workshop or let's put them together and define our definition of done, definition ready? What would you do if you had some teams that will be starting next
Mhm.
week to do Scrum? What would you prepare them?
Yeah, we're actually doing that. I'm together with somebody else at the company that I'm coaching right now. We have this whole department that we're starting up team by team, one by one, sometimes 3 teams at the same time. So we're actually doing that. And what we do is we do one introduction workshop before the first sprint, in which we explain the basics of an agile way of thinking and the different roles. But that's about it. We don't dive into things too deeply. We don't go into estimations or writing user stories or anything like that. We just have a first look with them at what could be their backlog. So, what are you guys working on right now? Let's take that as a basis. And then we'll just start the sprints. And then gradually they will bump into things that they've taken in too much work, right? Because, they don't know how much they can handle. So, then we'll start talking about estimations and about making your user stories smaller, and all kinds of things will pop up all by themselves, and they will then see that, okay, this is actually helping us take the next step. Because if you try to arrange everything up front, then they have no clue why they're doing that. So we just like to keep it short and then just start and just go, and we'll figure it out. I think that's yeah, and that seems to work actually. So yeah, that's the way we do it.
Okay, makes sense. So instead of preparing the team like with let's have a definition of done session, you start right away and then they will figure out that they need a definition of ready and then they will start working it on into the
Exactly.
cycles, right? Okay.
Yeah, they get the questions, and we have some of the answers and ideas of how they could do that. And then it also makes sense for them.
Got it. One question that I like to do when I'm interviewing Scrum Masters for the company where I work for is to ask them, Scrum Masters or Agile coaches, right? Is to ask them, hey, if you had to pick one of these Scrum events as the most important one and one Scrum event as the least important one, which one would you choose and why? Of course, the obvious answer is all are important, but I still want to ask you, if you had to pick one, what would you pick as the most important and the least important?
The most important, I think, yeah, I think it's obvious to say the retrospective, because that, as a Scrum Master, you have the most feeling with that. I think from a business perspective, the sprint review would be most important, because that's where you get your feedback on what you're actually making, and you're getting into contact with your stakeholders, and yeah, collecting the feedback to take the next step. So from an agile perspective as an organization, I'd say that's the most important one. The least important, what's the least important? Yeah, I don't know, the planning maybe, because if you do your prep work during the sprint, if you have your refinement sessions, etc., then planning could be over in like half an hour or so. You could just go, and yeah, if you have an experienced team that knows what to handle, how to what to pick from the backlog, yeah, that could be the least worrisome meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I agree. Okay. And regarding this topic about the events, now that we are talking about those, which event do you think is the most misunderstood, or the one that is not being done correctly in your experience?
Yeah, that must be the retrospective. I think it's very hard for people to focus on improving the processes. So it's very hard, I see, for developers and team members to think about just the process. So how are we creating our products or services, and how do we improve on that? It's very easy for them to go to the content, right? So we had user story XYZ, and there was this or that, and then it's about the content again, and not about the process. Okay, but how did we handle that, and how did we do that, and how can we improve our process so that next sprint we can actually handle such a situation better? And that's difficult, and it's also difficult to get actionable items out of that. So how do we improve that then? So we've noticed now that this is not going right. We need to improve on that, but how do we do that, and how do we check that, and how do we not forget about that? Because sometimes you see that they put actions on an action list somewhere, and then next retrospective you ask them, okay, so what did you do with the actions? Because we noticed that we needed to improve on this. Did we do something with that this sprint? And no, we kind of forgot about that. So yeah, I think that the retrospective is the most difficult one and most misunderstood.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Okay, Patrick, I will need to wrap it up soon. I know you're also a busy person, so before jumping out of the call, I would like to ask you if there's any. Well, I have one more, but this is the previous to the last one. Is there any topic that I missed, or any questions that I skipped or that I missed, and you would like to talk about some topic?
Um, Yeah, I think it's interesting to know, but you wouldn't know how to ask this question. But what I learned from psychology that I didn't know before is a few important things I think that are not widely known within the agile world as well. So, for instance, I got this book here. It's called The Authoritarian Dynamic by Dr. Karen Stenner.
Mhm.
She writes about politics, but I think her knowledge is very useful for us in the agile world as well. It's about, she did research into the way people consider authority. And she came to the conclusion that, and her research has been replicated all over the world, that about one third of the people are inclined to oneness and order and conformity, and one third of the people don't really like diversity and complexity, and they're very much against the complexity of things. So when things start to change in an organization, you have to take into consideration that about one third of the people there do not like difficulty, and they don't want things to change, not because they don't like change, but because they don't like the complexity.
Mhm.
And that's an important aspect that I think is sometimes overlooked, because we're very much used to think that people fear change, but it's not necessarily the change itself. It's more the complexity behind it. And the message of Karen Stenner is also, if you try to create change in an environment where people are afraid of the complexity, try to put it in a wrapper in such a way that it sounds less complex than it might be. So try to stress the simplicity of it, and try to make sure that those people that are very much against diversity, complexity, etc., that they feel comfortable in the way the change is going. I think that's a very important aspect of change management that is often overlooked. And I think that's, in general, I think the whole concept of biases out of psychology is very important. So people looking for confirmation of their own beliefs, and like the confirmation bias and availability bias, and there are all kinds of biases that that play into your work as an agile coach or a scrum master inside your daily work that you have to be aware of. And if you're not aware of those things, then you're going to miss certain aspects of change and how the team and the whole organization is operating. So I think there are quite a few things, that also address in my book, of course, that say, okay, this aspect, this sort of bias, you can address that in such and such a way if you see it in your organization. I think that's
Cool.
interesting.
Yeah, so two really, really good topics, I would say, the biases. And you might say, well, I'm not biased, but most of the time, biases are not recognizable until you work on them, right? You start trying to identify them, and then you figure out they are there. And I have been in some companies where we actually have some exercises with the persons from the department that are promoting the inclusiveness of the company, etc. And then they put us into some exercise, and we actually, with some examples, you say, oh, I never thought that this was some decision that I made of being with having a bias, right, towards something, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important. And the other one that you mentioned, the simplification, I also think it's pretty important, because we try to sell agile. I try to sell agile all the time to the customers, and I have never thought that I should include the simplification part of it in the pitch, right? Because if not, then the companies are like, why would I go through all of these? Why would I go through a million workshops and coaching and consulting, and if it's going to create more trouble or more work for my workers, right? So making sure that the simplification part is there in the pitch and actually do it and execute towards it makes a lot of sense, right? So thank you for sharing those two. Okay, so so the only thing left is I would like to ask you, Patrick, what projects or products are you currently working on, and where could we follow up with your work? I will put the link to your books in the description, in the comments, but also let us know how can the persons that saw this interview, and not the interview, but conversation, and wants to keep up with you, where can they find?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. Connect on LinkedIn. I will. I'm working on a few articles that I'm going to write on LinkedIn. I also write regularly on a medium.com. I post something there every week. And you can follow me on LinkedIn. I think for the most recent information. I'm also on Twitter. I also have a few videos on YouTube, also about psychology. I'm working also on more articles that I will post either on Medium or on LinkedIn.
Awesome. So we will put all the links to your social media and to the Medium link over there. And Patrick, it has been a great conversation. I hope that the audience liked it as much as I did and learned as much as I did. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time. And let's see if we can plan for another one soon. Maybe soon, right?
Yeah, nice. It would be nice. Thank you very much. It's my honor. Thanks.
Thank you, man. Have a great one. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye bye.
Bye.